All right, time to talk about Nick Martin. McClain Baxley covers Oklahoma State football for OK State 247. Everybody knows I love the 24/7 network because, I mean, it's boots on the ground in every football town. And I know Oklahoma State just wrapped up the spring game or spring practice. And you saw Mike Gundy yesterday. I'm hoping for a little bounce back. I was in Eugene yesterday. They're going to play an early season non-con game, which is cool. But all right, Nick Martin. Third round. Maybe he was part of the reason Oklahoma State had a down year because he got hurt. What did you think of the 49ers drafting Nick Martin 75th overall?
I mean, Nick Martin's a guy that when you want to make a prototypical linebacker, prototypical like football guy, he fits that to a T. He's super muscular, super fast, hard hitting. He comes from East Texas, which is just kind of a hard-nosed town, hard-nosed area. Landon Jackson from Arkansas is another guy from the same high school. Two guys that are just, football is life and football means a lot, and they're just going to go out and play it, old-fashioned way, hard-hitting and flying around. And so for Nick Martin to get drafted and pretty, highly, especially like you said, he missed the second half of the season this year. I think it speaks to how good his 2023 season was, leading the Power Five in tackles that year and really just commanding out of nowhere. He played a little bit as a redshirt freshman and then kind of broke onto the scene in 2023 and just, all Big 12, a lot of awards, a lot of praise that season. And so he's a guy that's he's gonna work hard. He's gonna be the guy that really just steps into a defense and learns the defense and studies it. And when given the chance to make a play, he's gonna make it more times than not.
We talked about his speed. Maybe that's the answer. His greatest strength, and where do you see his biggest need to develop, or what's his biggest weakness?
I think, like I said, the biggest speed is definitely ball hawk if you're a linebacker, middle guy. But that's finding the ball is one of his strengths. But yeah, I mean, I think getting him out of position is something that he might be a little too aggressive sometimes. We saw this year, especially when whether it was motion, whether it was a couple of guys on screen stuff, he kind of got a little lost. He was going so aggressively towards the ball or towards the guy he was covering, and they ended up going the other way. And so I think he might be a little too aggressive at times, and that might be like a Michael Scott answer of I'm too personable or anything. But yeah, I mean, I think sometimes being patient and waiting for the play to develop a little bit longer will benefit him as he grows in this role. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that he could improve upon. But for the most part, I mean, this guy is a guy that very raw, very athletic, and can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, so he had an MCL injury that did not require surgery. It sounds like. What were you surprised he got drafted where he got drafted, given that injury says it 100%, but was it the combine? Did it surprise you that he got drafted that high?
I think so, just because he had one good year, really. Like I said, his first year he played a little bit, but wasn't eye catching. But then this year he was on track to have another good year. But like you said, only 5 games on a team that went 3-9. So it shows that he's they trust him and just the raw athleticism, raw talent that is Nick Martin. So I was a little surprised he went third round. That high, ahead of guys like Colin Oliver, another Oklahoma State guy who did end up get drafted later on Saturday, but a guy that had more film, in-game film and stuff. But yeah, he's a guy that I think just based on his, like I said, raw athleticism, raw talent, he's a guy that you got to take a chance on. You can kind of mold him into whatever you want him to be, where you want him to be in that middle linebacker or anywhere in the linebacker core there in San Francisco. He's a guy that I think a lot of scouts are excited about for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of Niner fans, everyone starts Googling and YouTubing and one of the things just scrolling on Twitter on Saturday was this clip of him chasing down Xavier Worthy. Now it wasn't Xavier Worthy had to cut it back, but still, I mean, you watch and you go, oh my God, this guy is fast. And then I saw, I was reading Dane Brugler's scouting report in The Athletic, and one of his lines is built like a muscular safety. And, people start thinking about around here, Fred Warner, who was not a prototypical linebacker at BYU and got drafted around the same spot, 70-75. Now he's taller, Nick's, I see 6 foot, I see 5'11", and I'm a pro roundup on the height measurement guy. But is that his best trait? Like how much of is his speed a huge part of his game?
His speed's definitely deceptive because though he is, maybe might be considered shorter, he's got a lot of weight, a lot of muscle on him. And so I think that Xavier Worthy play was crazy because it was in Big 12 championship and it was still a game at that point. I think it was like 7-0 early in the first half, and then Texas went on and I don't know how much Nick Martin played in the second half, but yeah, I mean he's got that speed. It's a little deceptive, and he out of nowhere there'll be plays where it's on one side of the field. It looks like it's there's no way that Martin can get involved, and he does. He ends up with a half tackle or ends up with a full tackle. Getting into the backfield, getting sideline to sideline. He's got that good quickness. That I know Fred Warner's a guy that he kind of looks up to, and he said that the only jersey he's ever bought was a Fred Warner jersey, Fred Warner San Francisco jersey. So I don't know. That's just trying to sell himself to the 49er fan base, but yeah, I mean Warner's definitely a guy that he kind of models his game after, and did in Stillwater.
People around here are hoping that maybe he can replace Fred Warner's longtime running mate, Dre Greenlaw. And Dre Greenlaw had a very endearing personality. He was likable and a great teammate. He was very intense on the field, and every year probably won the award for most likely to draw an unsportsmanlike post whistle penalty. So you get to talk to Nick Martin. What is Nick Martin like? What's the guy like?
He's a guy that doesn't really care what you think. That's not coming off as he's not aggressive or not. Not that he doesn't care. He's a guy that he'll slip back. He wears his slippers that have different dogs and different animals on it. He is big into fashion. He wants to he has a clothing line that he's proud of, and he's a guy that he's a man of few words until you get him to say more words. I think you got to kind of, especially that first year when he was we were talking to him almost every week just because he was having such a good season, and as the season got on, he got more comfortable with us. He got more comfortable with himself, just kind of talking about football, talking about life, talking about his faith, talking about his upbringing, and he's a guy that once you get him rolling, he's a good interview, a good guy to talk to, and he just likes to have fun. Whether that fun is on the football field, whether that fun is playing video games with his guys. But yeah, he's a joy to be around, and a guy that I don't know how many t-shirts he's going to sell, but he's a guy that is definitely fun to be around for sure.
Before the NIL portal world, Mike Gundy was fighting the coach NIL portal world famously, right? And you better than me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, please. But there was a run there for a few years where he kept getting coordinators poached every year. He's tried to go hire I'll go hire some guy that no one's ever heard of from a place no one's ever been, and that guy gets poached right away. And then we evolve into the and that's a money thing. And so then we get to the NIL world, and the same thing happens with players. So I'm not very familiar with Oklahoma State's collective, kind of the power of their collective, but it would seem to me that given the year that Nick Martin had in 2023, that he was probably a candidate for Texas, Oklahoma, somebody to try and swoop in on. Did he ever almost leave? What was the situation there?
I don't think so. He was a guy that loved Oklahoma State. They were, one of the few schools that took it. He had plenty of offers to play all over the field, but he wanted to play linebacker. He wanted to play defense, and Oklahoma State was one of the teams that was going to let him do that. I think Jim Knowles recruited him and then left, and then he had Derek Mason and then Brian Nardo the last 2 years.
Wow.
And so he's seen a lot, but no, I think he's a guy that loves Stillwater. He's a homebody. He's a guy that once he's comfortable, he's going to stay comfortable. Like I said, comes from East Texas, comes from Texarkana, which is a very close knit community, and so I think that was big on him. I mean, a lot of guys talk about the Cowboy culture and how the university and the fans really buy into the program, and so I think that meant a lot to him. And he was, one of the stars. After that 2023 season, they went 10-3 or 10-4, and had a really good season. And he was one of those, him, Colin Oliver, Ollie Gordon were the three guys that were kind of the face of the program for a couple of years. And so I think he really appreciated that. And I'm not super sure that anybody can really sway him away from that after the year he had in 23.
That's cool. I mean, to have the injury and still get drafted as high as he did says, it paid off.